to the fourth branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the fourth branch program. For the past few weeks, we have been talking exclusively about two very important topics: the erosion of our democracy and race relation in America. Although those two topics have nothing in common, but there is one common denominator that binds those two topics, and that makes them very difficult to debate. It is ignorance. It is said that ignorance is the biggest threat to our democracy. It is also said that the mother of all evil is ignorance. As we will return to debate those two issues, we will approach those issues in a very different way through the remaining of the year. And when we come back in 2019, we will continue with the format that we've been discussing those topics all along. We'll be right back. Hi, I am MD, host of the fourth branch program. War on Blacks is a new topic added to the fourth branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relations in America. The goal is threefold. One, to bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discriminations, and racism in the country. Two, to expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. Three, to extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we, as a society, be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. First, I would like to apologize to my fan base. Well, I was kidnapped by aliens. I apologize because I was abruptly kidnapped by a group of aliens in my family who dragged me to an unexpected events of family gathering during the holidays. I never had a chance or the opportunity to provide such explanation prior to my disappearance. So I humbly apologize for that. And I promise you that I will be more vigilant in the future and be better prepared. So the next time I get kidnapped by alien, I don't leave you trying to figure out exactly what happened, or if it's just a complete abandonment of this program. Now, of course, I'm very certain that for those who hope that I would go away, they probably were celebrating during the holidays thinking, oh, that was it. But I am sorry to disappoint those individuals, because I am back, and this program is again back to discuss those very important topics. Now, for the remaining of the year, we will discuss, we will not abandon our program, which is currently the war on blacks, and of course, the democracy in America in serious jeopardy. Now, those programs will return, at least the formats will return next year. Now, for the remaining of the year, we will continue to debate those topics, but we will use a different formats, and we will also not stray away from the original intent of the program. We will discuss, as you will see shortly, instead of the big of the title War on Blacks, you will see the title Race Relation. And of course, instead of democracy in America in serious jeopardy, you will simply see the banner Democracy in America. Now, in reference to a much larger objective, we will get ourselves involved in a more philosophical approach to those two topics, and which also will represent some sort of preparation for the much larger topics when we continue next year with War on Blacks and how our democracy has been under attack and is being eroded. So stay with us. We will continue this conversation shortly after a quick announcement. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then. The danger of silence. You most likely have heard the expression that tells you that silence is golden. And we even have a reference in the Bible about the silence of Jesus, even during the time of him being tortured and not saying much. But if that's the case, if silence is golden, then why would there be a danger of being silent? If I were to ask the question to anyone, would you want not to be able to speak? In other words, would you want to be mute? There was a program on Twilight Zone where one of the character wanted to shut somebody else and proposed to give the person $1 million in order to not say a word for 1 hour. Now, that doesn't sound like a big challenge because it is a very, very short period of time to collect $1 million. Now, remember, it's the Twilight Zone. Now, in the process of doing that, the conversation goes in such a way that the individual who believed that he could stay silent for 1 hour try everything humanly possible and lost. So he decided anyway to collect those $1 million. So he consulted with a doctor who proposed to make some modification to his vocal cord so that even if he were to talk, no sound will come out, and this way they would see him moving his lips, but since no sound would come out, so in 1 hour he will collect his $1 million. So of course the doctor would reverse the process and he would be $1 million richer. But in the Twilight Zone, things don't always work that way. He sure collected his $1 million, but there was one simple problem. The doctor could not reverse the process, could not reverse the procedure. Actually, I'm not even sure that's the way the story ended, but rather either the doctor could not reverse the procedure or the doctor died and no other doctor would take upon this type of work to do because they don't know what the previous doctor did. Whatever the case was, the guy could not regain his ability to speak. Complete silence for the rest of his life. Now, even if it were to be for 5 minutes, 1 hour, 1 day, imagine that scenario for a minute. Now, the reason I bring that up is because both in the erosion of our democracy and in race relations in America, there are so many bad that have happened, and it is mostly due to the silence of those who could say something, who could have made an impact, and they chose to be silent. Now, there are times nobody would argue that it is necessary to be silent. Now, those are wise decisions that people make based on their either personal circumstances or based on certain circumstances, not to say anything because it's not beneficial to the individuals to say anything, or it's not beneficial to a group who may be impacted by someone talking. So silence has its use. But because we don't live in a perfect world, And around us, there are a number of very bad things that have happened. And we know those bad things, or at least some of them, could have been avoided because if only individuals who are witnesses of those bad things, or who are close, who have knowledge of those bad things, did not stay silent. And in race relation in America, as well as currently in the erosion of our democracy, a number of people have stayed silent. Now, take the example, which is pretty obvious. If you are a supporter of the current administration, you may go along with what the administration is doing, but unless you are completely ignorant, completely stupid, you would know that quite a number of things the administration is doing is actually not good for the country. Now, for the constituent, they may not be in any position to do anything about that. But for the legislators, Republican legislators in particular, not only they have abandoned their primary duty, which is to make certain that we do not have an executive branch running amok, but on top of that, you do not have Republican legislators for the past 2 years. They stay silent, they complain behind the scene, because a number of journalists, reporters in Washington have reported about that. They talk behind the scene about how bad things are for the country, and yet they stay silent. In other words, they project the belief to the constituent who are looking up to them for reaction, for position. They are looking up to those individuals who stay silent. And as such, our country, our democracy has been eroded every single day that the current administration has been in power. Now, for a number of Americans in general who were born here, and people came here at very early age, very young age, babies and probably up to 3-4 years old, may not necessarily have the understanding that this system of democracy we have here in this country can be lost. For people who have been living here all their lives, they cannot possibly think of any scenario where democracy in America is no longer. Now, before I give you an example of how possible that is, let me say it is not pleasant to live in an environment where where the system of government is not democratic. It is hell, authoritarian regime, dictators. In those type of government structure, the citizens of the country do not have any say over anything. But worse, they don't even have a say over their own lives. The government doesn't like what they say, maybe arrested, maybe jail, maybe killed. Now, this is the reason that most of the individuals here in the United States of America think our system of democracy is never going to go away, because there is no way in the world that can happen. And I believe that I give the example here many times that when Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, that country was a system of democracy. 18 months later, when the president of Germany died, that's when Adolf Hitler became the monster that we know of. and democracy was over. It doesn't happen overnight. It happened gradually as we give in to the behavior, to the inclination of someone who does not have any respect for the rule of law. Gradually, we lose what we have cherished for more than 2 centuries, which means our system of democracy is being eroded. Now, the reason it's almost impossible sometimes to get to a point where we get our government to work as intended by the framers of the Constitution is because you always have a party. Now it is the Republican Party. You always have a party which will redefine for the constituent what patriotism is, what is supposed to be done for the country, even when it is blatantly wrong. Now, if I were to ask any Republican, whether in the legislative body or constituent, if he or she is patriot, I have no doubt in my mind that individual will jump at the opportunity to say, of course I am. But the question is not whether you think you are, whether you are patriot. Patriot does have to make sacrifice in order to protect the integrity of what the republic stands for. That's what a patriot does, even at the cost of his life. Now, saying you are a patriot doesn't make you a patriot. Now, as such, you have Republican for the past 2 years in the legislative body who may claim patriotism, but they all stay silent in the face of a system of democracy being eroded by one individual. The danger of silence. Now, to make it clear to you how important it is in those circumstances not to be silent, it is silence that had, at very least indirectly, that has caused World War II. History tells us that a number of Hitler's friends were not necessarily in sync with what he was doing. The moves that he was making that eventually will trigger World War II, there were a few close friends who did not agree with him, but they stay silent. So you see, there is grave danger to being silent, because yes, there is a possibility if they spoke, they could have been killed. There is no doubt about that, because Adolf Hitler didn't want anyone to get in his way. So there is that possibility that yes, they could have been killed. There is a possibility they could have been jailed if Hitler didn't want to kill his friends. There is that possibility. But silence, because they didn't say anything, we would never know. Now, had one person say something, a second person say something, a third person say something, you know, goodness is very contagious. Maybe there would have been more people, including his generals, people who served in his administration, in his regime. Maybe they would have had more courage to oppose what he was doing. Maybe we could have avoided World War II. But because those close friends did not say anything, although we have no way of knowing whether they would have made it different, but we can say for certain that their silence is a factor in World War II. although indirectly, because we cannot say for certain. So yes, there is a danger in being silent. The consequences are immeasurable. It could be devastating. It could be catastrophic, because had those friends talked to Adolf Hitler, maybe the world would have been a different place. We would have not had World War II. Maybe we would have had a better world, better economy, better relationship between various countries in the world. But we would never know, because guess what? Those friends stayed silent. Here in America, we are currently observing an erosion of our democracy, because there are a number of people who simply stay silent. Ironically, those who speak are either ignorant, or they're the same caliber of the people who went along with Adolf Hitler's plan, meaning if you're burning down the country, we're with you. And we saw that kind of display in the Trump administration, where people gather around the table and praising him for the kind of thing he's doing. And any logical mind has to wonder, are those people on drugs? Were they on drugs? Were they hypnotized? But no, they weren't. They're the type of people who do not care an iota about our democracy, who do not care about our freedom, and would go along with whoever as long as they have a position next to that individual. And that's what a number of people who supported what Hitler was doing, although they knew what he was doing was wrong. Von Papen was one of such individuals. They know the guy was doing what's wrong, but they supported him. They gave him resources to continue doing what he was doing until we get to World War II. Yes, there are those people right here in the United States encouraging Donald Trump, trampling of the rule of law, ignoring our Constitution because they have a position next to him and they can take advantage of that. They stay silent. So, similar situation can be observed in the race relations in America. And the reason we're talking about racism, prejudice, discrimination, and you're going to see that there are individuals who fall into the category of those who simply go along with whatever is going on because it benefits them. They don't care who it doesn't benefit. And there is a group that simply, indifferent. And there is another group that don't think things are as bad. And the group that believe or that sees, that witnesses that things are bad and needs to be changed, usually those groups are in the same predicament as individuals who are victims of that problem. As such, you see that silence is used in those various areas in our lives, and that is not good. There is no such thing as it is good to be silent in the face of evil. Ignorance is the mother of all evil. And we've already determined the major obstacle to what's going on, to what we're going through, and not being able to improve is ignorance. Now, the Republican constituent in particular have been kept in ignorance. They tune into Fox. All they're being fed is falsehood. They listen to the president, all they're being fed is falsehood. They tune into any of the publication or network like Breitbart, Rush Limbaugh, and so on, all they're being fed is falsehood. So they are in the ignorance lane. Now, those who have the knowledge, the understanding, stay silent. So that's what's currently going on in the country, both in our system of democracy and in race relation in America. I'll be right back. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then. Throughout our conversation about race relation in America, we identified two major groups of whites. The group which comprises whites who are racist, who discriminate, who are prejudiced, and the group which comprises those who are not racist, who do not discriminate. Now, since I started this program, there has been a lot of different people who have different views about this program. And although it's impossible for me to know whether those individuals are black or white, I try to determine by the kind of comment that they make, although it's not always possible. But suffice to say, the race relation problem in America is due to almost exclusively to ignorance. And you will notice that the reason I say that is because the major group that which understand and knows what is going on, most of the time, individual who comprise this group are silent. Now, remember I mentioned that the Civil War happened because there were millions of whites who wanted to keep slavery around. And there were millions of whites who wanted to end slavery. As such, it's always one of the most difficult topics to talk about here in the United States, race relation. Because once this topic comes up, blacks are emotional about it, especially blacks who are well aware of history, and whites are very defensive because they too are well aware of history. Well, partly. Now, those two groups of whites are subdivided into four major groups. Now, the group that here in the United States, most people are familiar with, and both blacks and whites use that group as a scapegoat for the problem in the country. Those are the white nationalists, formerly KKK. Now they under various different labels. But in a sense, the KKK, the white nationalists, the white supremacists, those are the people that here in the United States, any conversation about race, about racism, about discrimination, blacks see it as a better way to talk about the issue shortly, temporarily, and whites are so happy that they can dump this argument on just a few people, a few individuals who are causing the big issue in the country. In reality, that's not true, because the white nationalists, the white supremacists, the KKK is they very small group. It's in the fringe. They do not represent much in this country. And I've already made mention that it would have been nice to know who we are dealing with if there were a way to identify those who feel a certain way. Now, we know that's the case, but they are the scapegoat because both blacks and white, as I just mentioned, use the white nationalists, the white supremacists as their punching bag to say this is what's causing racism, discrimination in the country. Let me be the first one to say that's absolutely not true. Because while those individuals that they do have their extreme views and they do indeed hate blacks or they don't like blacks or however way that they feel about other races, the bottom line is the group is very small group, although you'll find them in various parts of the country, some parts more so than others, but they very small group. So they're not the problem of racism and discrimination in the country. The second group is also, actually it's just the opposite of the first group. It's a group of white who are either completely oblivious of the situation of non-white in the country. They indifferent. And that group, we very rarely interested in what's going on in other community, in community that are non-white. They have no interest in that. They're just indifferent to the plight of non-whites. Now, the third group actually is also subdivided, but the third group is the group of whites who believe, who understand, who may have even seen discrimination, racism in the country. They believe those factors do exist in the country, but they think it's exaggerated. Now, in this group, you'll find some who would be moving towards the second group and some who would be moving towards the third group, the fourth group rather, that we're going to be talking about. And the reason is because based on their life experience, based on circumstances, because circumstances do change based on where they're at in life, whether it's location or jobs or what have you, then their views may change because today they're in a predicament where they can only talk about the very few example instances that they know of, so they think this problem is exaggerated. But as their predicament are changing and the situation is changing for them, then they start becoming more and more knowledgeable of the situation. Then they may change their mind in terms of what the situation is really. Now, the last group, which is the fourth group, is the group of whites who are in the midst of this problem, which means they seen it, they understand it, they witness it, they live it, they experience it. Because some of them may be married to a black individual, or they may have family who married to a black, or they may be related to, or they may be very close friends to. So they seen it, they understand it, and they also are the whites who have been fighting to put a step to clamp down on discrimination and racism in the country. Now, the third group that I just mentioned, you'll find people who would move up to being indifferent and who would move down to helping be part of the solution in race relation. Now, the danger of silence. Obviously, to all those who wish that I either go away or stay silent, I'm afraid that your wishes are not going to come true, because the very problem that first we know that ignorance is the root of ignorance is the mother of all evil, meaning as long as you stay in ignorance, there is not much you can contribute towards helping society improve. Now, I did mention in a couple of occasions a tweet that I sent out that anyone's ignorance is a huge burden on society. It is because it is difficult for that individual to be of use to society. They will be rather a burden to society. And that's why it's also very troubling that GOP legislators, elected officials, they go out of their way to keep their constituent in ignorance. I'm not sure I understand this mindset, the logic behind it. If you have a conversation for 5 minutes with any Republican constituent, it will become very clear to you very quickly that they have been, if you want the word, educated in ignorance. They hear it from their elected official. They hear it from Fox. They hear it everywhere that they turn. They live in this world of ignorance, which makes it difficult to have a conversation and actually help with any topic. Why do you think group number 3 believes that the problem of racism, discrimination in the United States is exaggerated? Ignorance. Now, there is nothing wrong for someone to be ignorant of a particular topic. All men are born ignorant. No exception. All men are born ignorant. Most, quite a few of them, choose to stay and live in ignorance. That's a different story. We all start at the same level, in the same position, but as we grow, a number of us choose to stay and live in ignorance. But what makes the situation, the predicament, even worse is the fact that if we take, again, the Republican legislators in general and the Republican pundit, they go out of their way to make certain that their audience stay in ignorance. That's the part that baffles the mind. Why would someone want something like that? And they don't just feed falsehoods to their constituent, but when it comes time, when it becomes impossible for them to say anything different than what blatantly true, factual in front of them, they stay silent. So they use the the tools that are more dangerous to our democracy. Make sure that their constituents stay ignorant. And of course, the other approach, strategy, if you like, is to make certain it stays that way, because if something is done, like in the case of the current administration, that's blatantly wrong. Now, instead of having those legislators who are supposed to be leaders, instead of coming out and say something, they stay silent. So they want to keep their constituent in ignorance. The ignorance in race relation is an important aspect to look into, and the reason for that is because one could say that, why does it matter? You have a group of whites who are racist, who discriminate, but there is also another group who doesn't. So why should we care about the group that does? The danger of silence, the danger of saying nothing. We currently talking about slavery. And we were at a point where we're talking about how slaves now are in rebellion stage. Now, during slavery, remember how much I emphasize the fact that there is a common denominator between the erosion of our democracy and race relation? Do you remember what it is? Well, it's ignorance. This is what represent what is considered the factors that are eroding, that help to erode our democracy, and that also the same factor that make race relation in America a difficult topic to resolve. Ignorance. Now, Martin Luther King talked about conscientious stupidity. Now, stupidity is the deliberate effort to stay ignorant. Conscientious. Now, the reason I brought that up is because you're going to see very clearly when I talk about ignorance, it may convey the idea that the person doesn't know what he or she's doing or doesn't understand, because that's really the definition of being ignorant when you apply it to any topic. So when Martin Luther King referred to conscientious stupidity, imagine someone who doesn't know about something. That's ignorance. Now imagine someone who acquired the knowledge but decides to continue to act as if he or she doesn't have the understanding and the knowledge. That conscientious stupidity. Now, why is that important? Remember, I keep talking about ignorance as the problem that we've been confronting in various aspects of our society. It is in the erosion of our democracy. It is in race relation in the country. But conscientious stupidity, which is what you would call the downgraded version of ignorance, is what most people, whites, who practice discrimination, who are racist, those have embraced conscientious stupidity. And I'm going to show you why I say that, and I'm going to prove to you why I say that, because there is a big difference between when you're silent about something, and usually those are the same people who stay silent about those type of issues, because they have acquired or they practice conscientious stupidity. As such, they have to be silent. They stay silent not because they don't know, but because they don't see any reason why they would work towards what's right when it doesn't benefit them. Is what that means in English. Well, before I explain that, let's go on a break. We'll be right back.
Don't go anywhere. The fourth branch program will return in just a moment.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, The Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended The Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended The Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
If I were to ask the following question, all the individuals who currently support Donald Trump to the bitter end, especially those who are more vocal, claiming that he did nothing wrong, referring to the Russia investigation. The question is, do they really believe that Donald Trump is innocent? That's really the question, because anybody that comes and say he done nothing wrong, in fact, I have met a number of those people that says there is no proof that Donald Trump did anything wrong. Why this witch hunt? Do they believe? Do they honestly believe Donald Trump is innocent? Can anyone who actually today is vocal about supporting Donald Trump put his life on the line and say, I believe that Donald Trump is innocent of all those things that he's accused of? You start getting an understanding what conscientious stupidity is. When the individual recognizes he's doing something wrong, but instead of admitting to it and change for the good of the country, they would force the issue until they burn down the country. This is conscientious stupidity. This is not politics. It's pure logic. Do you believe that Donald Trump is innocent? If you cannot answer that question, then you have a different problem. But if you can answer the question, but you still decide that you want to continue to support someone that's eroding our democracy, then this is conscientious stupidity. Now, back to race relation. Conscientious stupidity, when in relation to race relation, the individual that either say it's exaggerated or those who are completely indifferent, well, the white nationalists, I already removed them from the equation because, as we've been discussing, that they do not represent a number large enough to cause that problem in the United States. The racism, the discrimination, they're not at the center of that. During the war, the Civil War, there were millions of whites who fought to keep black slaves. There weren't just a few. Hundred thousands lose their life to keep it that way. And also you have thousands of whites who also lost their life to end slavery. Big problem with relation. Now, here's the irony of the whole thing. And that's why I call it conscientious stupidity. Now, the whites who discriminate, the whites who are racist, is it because they don't know any better? Well, of course they do. They choose to practice conscientious stupidity. How could I possibly know that? Now, as I've been discussing, the generation of today, probably up to even great-great-grandpa, twice great-great-grandpa, may have not been around during slavery. So the conversation, although I touch on slavery, they may have not been around, but the baggage that came with slavery were passed down to them, and they continue to pass it to the future generation. And by baggage, I meant really information. As they passing baggages to the next generation, they're also passing the wealth that they accumulated on the back of the blacks to the next generation, to the future generation further down, all the way to probably you, if you came from that a lineage of family who owned slaves. Now, are those whites stupid? Were they stupid? No, they were conscientiously stupid. And the reason I say that is because here's what's funny about the whites who fought to keep black slaves. Now, I say funny, I don't mean funny in a good sense. Ironic, sad. I must also say that there were whites who were not silent, but in the midst of the group that were practicing, that condoned, that participated in slavery, there were always a small group that knew it was wrong, but they stay silent. The individuals who fought with their lives to keep black slaves, they left England, came here to escape exactly the same thing under which they put blacks. Ironic, isn't it? They escaped England when they crafted the Constitution. If you pay close attention to the way it was crafted, they resented the idea of an individual having full power over their lives and telling them what to do, what not to do, and being able to dispose of them whichever way, we're referring to queen and kings. They resented that idea. Yes, they left England. They escaped the regime, the kingdom type of government, because in a kingdom, the king or the queen has the last word. Nobody can question what the king or the queen said, demanded, want. If the king were to say to kill someone, the person doesn't have to have done anything wrong. The person has to die. We even have a reference in the Bible as such when they say that the individual who pleased, at least her daughter, who pleased the king during a festive ceremony where she was dancing, and she pleased the king to the point, and the king said, ask me anything you want, I'll give it to you. And the queen asked for the head of John the Baptist. And according to that story, the king had no choice. He sent for John the Baptist's head. And the story said they put the head in a platter. Now, those people escaped England, came to the new land, Newfoundland, and they swear that never again would they live under such government where they don't have control of their own lives, where someone can dispose of their life whichever they want, when they can enslave them, put them through forced labor, that they could not go along with. That's the same individuals, which means they knew better. We're not talking about people who did not understand. The people, the white people who enslaved the blacks knew better. There is no excuse. They didn't know any better. They knew better because they formed a system of government which freed them from the type of government they fled from, which pretty much enslaved them in a sense, because they didn't have any say over anything. They could be beaten at will. They could be jailed at will. They could be killed at will. They escaped that government. And they come here to the new land, and what did they do in return? They did exactly the same thing they hated to blacks. Yes, they knew better. But the problem was even worse, because those who knew better stayed silent, because they could have said something. Say, well, guys, come on. We escaped that government because they were doing those kind of things to us. And now we want to do the same thing to another group. They stayed silent. But here's what was even more ironic than everything else. In 1776, well, actually prior to that, 1773, during the time that they were fighting against the British kingdom, you know, the soldier that came to make sure that they submitted to the king. Yes, it's a Newfoundland, they away from the kingdom, but the kingdom, the queen, wanted to make certain that they obey the law in the Newfoundland as they did back in the mainland. And those people would not hear of it. They fought with everything they had, the strength that they had, everything that they had. They organized, they hid in the bushes, because as far as they were concerned, they would not go back to that life. There were at least 5,000, at least on record, 5,000 blacks who fought side by side with the white to push back on the English. 5,000. They were slaves, but they fought side by side with whites to push against the English. Great Britain. After the war was over, they won. Now they have a new republic, crafting the Constitution. Blacks were left out. When you read all men are created equal, blacks weren't part of that. So, yes, the whites practiced conscientious stupidity because they knew what they were doing to blacks was wrong. They knew that because they fought against that very thing that they were doing to blacks. But those, because as I mentioned earlier, there are always going to be groups that only see their profits. Just like you see today, Donald Trump couldn't care less about the United States of America. Donald Trump sees Donald Trump, business, money, and it's only the ignorant in the country that still cannot see clearly that's the case. But people with a sound mind, and you don't have to be a genius, just some logic can clearly show you that in black and white that's the case. So during those times, those same whites who solicited the help of 5,000 blacks to help them push against the kingdom. And eventually they won that war. And yes, blacks died in that war as well. Now you would think someone would have some revelation and say, hey guys, those blacks fought with us and free us from the kingdom. They can no longer be slaves. And guess what? We fought the kingdom because we don't want to be in that predicament. No, of course not. So they conscientiously practice stupidity in order to keep blacks slaves. So it wasn't oversight, it wasn't misunderstanding, it wasn't lack of understanding, it was conscientious stupidity that caused whites to keep black slaves. They asked them to fight with them to push back on the kingdom, which means they know if they lost, they would be under the same form of government that they left behind and they fled from. But when they won, they did not hesitate a single second to make certain that blacks stayed slave. Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a new topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies and complexities of race relations in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discriminations, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. to extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we, as a society, be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. I do thank you for spending the time with me, and I hope you are enjoying these holidays. In the meantime, if you have any question, any topic of interest to you that you would like us to research and debate, please do not hesitate to contact us. And of course, if you want to make any comment, criticism, suggestion about this program, do get in touch with us as well, and we would really very glad to hear from you. And as always, we hope you have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then. The Fourth Branch Podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.